Alright, I'm Justin Diamond, and today it's my pleasure to read for you Chapter 6 from my novel, Giant Special Tokyo Love. The English school assigned Sora as my conversation partner. We went out on a few dates. Keep in mind, Sora wasn't my student. She wasn't a student in my class, but I was still shy about the gray area I was delving into. Sora was a student at the school where I worked. Was that a violation? I didn't know, but in the end, it wasn't enough to stop me from holding her hand when I took her to a movie. By the end of the film, I took a chance and kissed her. From the way she kissed me back, I knew I hadn't made a mistake. We dated. I loved how small she was, and told her so, often. In fact, I said it too often. After saying it for the umpteenth time, she replied, "Why do you always call me little, tiny? Don't say that. I don't like it." It was the first time she had said no to me, the first time I heard a sternness in her usually happy-go-lucky, high-pitched voice. I made a note to myself never to call her little again. But I still had fun picking her up, having my way with her in the bedroom. Next to her twiggy limbs, for the first time in my life, I felt like I'm strong. Unlike the much larger and often fatter American girls, next to Sora, I was intimidatingly buff. If you would have asked me during that time in my life why I liked Sora, I would have mentioned how small she was, but I also would have mentioned her cell phone, what she called a Keitai. It was a Japanese cell phone, and it was common knowledge at the time that the Japanese had the best cell phones. Unlike American cell phones, which were just phones, Sora's could do anything. It had a built-in calendar. You could write emails and go on the web. It was pink, an unheard of color for a cell phone in the US. It had, similar to a keychain, a small blue anime cat character. It did everything except make phone calls. Japanese cell phones, Keitai, didn't work in America, which wasn't a surprise, but Sora still kept it around as an alarm clock. The way she clung to it, I felt like it was very important to her in a sentimental way. It was her little piece of Japan in America. We dated a few years and lived together for some of it. She taught me how to write in Japanese, the key being that Japanese is written with three, arguably four alphabets. Katakana and hiragana were the easiest two alphabets to learn. The alphabets she taught me. Kanji was the most difficult. Sora had a degree in Japanese calligraphy and used a brush on thin rice paper to create a few works of art, which she gave to my family for presents. Impressive, artistic kanji. Dragon for my father, wave for mom. She cooked all sorts of rice dishes, Japanese dishes that were new and exciting, but most of all, delicious. She knew that her sushi roll was the fastest way to my heart. But I didn't consider Sora for a serious relationship. Not until we got into a fight about birth control, and Sora shouted, "If you get me pregnant, I'm gonna have the baby. No woman had ever said that to me before, that she would have my baby. Even if it was in the middle of a fight or out of anger, her response was so reactionary as to reveal its honesty. I smiled because, for the first time in my life, here was a woman who liked me, who loved me enough to tie herself to me like that. But I didn't knock her up, not in America at least. When her visa expired, Sora went back to Japan. We parted at the airport, with Sora unable to hold back her tears, and me almost, but not quite, sad enough to cry. I was sure Sora was crying because she felt inadequate, like she wasn't good enough to marry, and her time was up. That, and the idea of the Christmas cake. It was a Japanese concept, even though it was also a big Christian reference. Nobody wants Christmas cake on the 26th. Sora had explained to me once, but she was way older than 26, much older than me. But even after explaining the whole Christmas cake conundrum, I never did quite learn what to make of it. Was it just a thing that people said, or was she really doomed to not being able to marry, just because she was in her 30s? We kept in touch and continued to email. We sent pictures. I eventually grew lonely. After only a year working full-time in the professional world, I took a vacation to Tokyo, proposed to Sora, and planned to move there next summer. Most of my friends and family hoped I'd thought it out well. I had. The marriage was absolutely the correct move. Hadn't they heard that old saying about if you really love something, let it go? Well, I had let Sora go, and our love had held strong. Proof that moving to Japan and marrying her was the right thing to do. Nobody on my side of the family could go to the Japanese wedding. It was too far for everyone except Mom and Stepdad. But it didn't matter. Sora had plenty of friends she could invite. The real part of the wedding ceremony, the important part, was only for a small select group of close family members. That was how they did it in Japan, in a Shinto wedding. It was how I found myself in a kimono, being led up a small flight of old stone steps to where a small, one-room temple stood at the top. The Shinto priest leading us was dressed funny, in blue robes, and a hat that looked like a cross between a fez and a dunce cap. As the groom, it was my place to follow behind the priest, with Sora at my side. The rest of the attendees followed behind us in a line. This included my mom and stepdad, as well as Sora's mother, father, and grandparents. A few steps up, I felt the urge to fart. Probably it would be silent, and carried by the breeze through the serene green surroundings. But no, when I released it, on an upstep the fart sputtered loudly into the relatives behind me. It was unusually loud, and nobody had trouble figuring out whose ass the noise had come from. But nobody could do anything about it either, other than hold their breath and pretend the odor wasn't there, vaguely present in their noses. When it came time for me to say my vows, I pulled out a handwritten sheet of notebook paper. Despite being able to read katakana and hiragana for such an important thing, I had written everything down in Romanji. I didn't have a clue what I was saying. It was a fact that troubled me. Was there a line about "till death do us part"? Or the clause about sickness and health? I didn't know. And when I asked Sora about it as we went over our pronunciation the night before, she didn't elaborate much. It's just a vow, similar to what, say, in Western marriage. That was all I knew about the vows as I read them. To me, they were just a bunch of funny sounding noises that amounted to one long I do. We had a costume change and a sushi cake, but in the end, I was sad when the event was finished. I was so busy dancing here and posing for pictures there that I hardly had the chance to enjoy my own wedding. The day concluded with Sora and I sharing a Japanese-style hotel room in the country. I was almost too exhausted to consummate the marriage. The key word being almost. Sora, my new wife, looked exhausted on the futon as well. One of my hands started to caress her on the soft mattress, but Sora snuffed me. She was too tired to have sex that night. This wasn't quite the way I'd hoped to start the marriage. My wedding day was a day I'd always thought of as the one day I was guaranteed to have sex. What did it mean if we didn't have sex then? Maybe only that both of us were genuinely tired. Or maybe that I was trapped in a bad deal. I told Sora that I wanted her to use birth control. Sora told me that she didn't want to use it, that she couldn't. The pills made her feel sick, but it didn't change how I felt when it came to have sex. I had dated her for years and married her, and for the first time in my life, I was going to enjoy sex without a condom. I was going to experience what sex really felt like, not the censored version where the Trojan man got in the way. It never once occurred to me that Sora's biological clock was ticking, that she actually wanted to get pregnant. I hadn't even thought about sex from her end, not until she showed me a pregnancy test with a positive sign and a beaming smile on her face. I wanted to discuss not having a baby, waiting until we had been married for a few years. I wanted to discuss options. But Sora's beaming smile, easily the largest I'd ever seen on her face, stopped me cold. She immediately told her parents the good news. I took longer hours at the school in Tokyo where I worked.